Akkor elkezdenénk ezt a mai konferenciánkat. Örülök ezeknek a problémáknak, hogyha nem lehet leülni, ez elnézést, akinek éppen nem tud, annak nem olyan kellemes, nekünk jó érzés, hogyha sokan vannak, akik a konferenciát szervezünk. Szeretettel köszöntöm Önöket a Republikon Intézet újabb konferenciáján. Én Horn Gábor vagyok, a Republikon Intézet egyik munkatársa, nem olyan sok közül. A mai konferenciánkra készülve aggódva néztük, hogy lesz-e eredménye az amerikai elnökválasztásnak csütörtökre, mert ugye hát a közvéleménykutatók, mi magunk is készítünk itt Magyarországon közvéleménykutatásokat, hogy átérezzük az amerikai közvéleménykutatók összes fájdalmát, amit most ők is átéreznek. Ugye nem ilyen eredményt mondtak, hanem egy ennél jóval szorosabb és nehezebben kiszámítható eredményt, úgyhogy bizonyos értelemben megkönnyítették a vitapartnereink, beszélgető társaink dolgát azzal, hogy eldőlt a választás eredménye, tehát nem úgy kell beszélgetnünk valamiről, hogy az még nincsen. Én magam a múlt héten talán egy hetet Amerikába töltöttem, és onnan azért látszott, vagy legalábbis jobban érzékelhető volt közelebbről, hogy ez a választás ez valami ilyen eredménnyel végződhet, de hát ez csak az én személyes érzéseim ebben a dologban, és nem is akarok erről beszélni. A mai konferenciánk témája csak az apropóként szerepel a témájuk között az amerikai elnökválasztás, ennél mélyebbre szeretnénk menni. Az európai, a magyar és az amerikai konzervativizmus, új konzervativizmus, szokták ezt populista szélsőjobbnak is nevezni, de ez már egy értékítélet, és szeretnénk ezt egy kicsit ennél, hogy mondjam, általánosabban megközelíteni. Szerepe, jelentősége mennyire alakítja át a világunkat, az első körben nemzetközi kitekintéssel, a második körben pedig a magyar vonatkozásait ennek az egész kérdésnek. Tényleg izgalmas volt abból a szempontból is ez a választás, hogy ki minek örül és ki miért bánkódik az eredmény láttán, ez mindenkinek persze a belső értékválasztása. De érdekes volt abból a szempontból ez a választás, hogy talán nem volt még olyan amerikai választás, ahol a magyar politikai kommunikációs eszközrendszert ennyire nyilvánvalóan fedezhettük fel. Ugye egy furcsa sajátos folyamatot láttunk, valamikor a 2000-es évek, 2008-2009 táján az Egyesült Államokból idejött egy új kampánytechnológia, Frankenstein és kollégái révén, ami itt kidolgozódott, megerősödött, és bizonyos értelemben visszakerült az Egyesült Államokba. Tehát egy ilyen sajátos folyamatot láttunk, ahogy ez mit kezdjünk az idegenekkel, hogyan lehet kezelni vagy nem kezelni, hogyan tud eljutni Amerika, ahol szinte mindenki idegen, az idegen szépből az idegen a gyűlölet tárgya és a kirekesztés legfontosabb alanya. Nagyon furcsa érzés az embernek meglátni, hogy sok esetben a leginkább idegen gyűlölők akár az első generációs bevándorlók, akik maguk is idegenként csöppentek be az adott közösségben, mondjuk az Egyesült Államokban, de hát épp a napokban láttuk, hogy ahogy a Nagy-Britanniában megválasztott konzervatív elnök, egyébként, aki első generációs bevándorló egyébként azzal tudott nyerni, hogy erőteljesen migráns ellenes szövegeket nyom a saját történetében. Tehát egy izgalmas világban élünk. Én magam nem tudom, hogy mennyire hat és mennyire változtatja meg a világunkat az, ami a Trump mostani második győzelme, ami szerintem egészen más lesz, mint az első, mert már nincs mit vesztenie. Ugye egy fura helyzet ez, hogy ő már még egyszer nem lesz elnök, a legutóbb még gondolhatta azt, hogy van veszteni valója, hiszen lesz még egy választás. Most már ez nem lesz, tehát szerintem abszolút új helyzet lesz, és ez az új helyzet hogyan határozza meg a világunkat, mennyire változik meg ez az egész hagyományos értelmet politikai közeg, mennyire alakul át, amit Magyarországon láttunk, hogy nagyon erőteljesen átalakult már, a világban hogyan alakul. Erről szeretnénk szólni az első része a konferenciának, és a második része pedig ennek az összesnek a magyar vonatkozásáról. Jó szórakozást, és akkor kezdjük azzal, hogy az ELF, az Európai Liberális fórum, ami ugye az Európai Liberális Pártcsaládnak egyfajta think tank, ilyen háttérintézménye, nekünk régi támogatónk, sokat köszönhetünk nekik, és szinte állandó résztvevői a paneleinknek Milos Hodun, aki most videóüzenetben küldi el, hogy ő mit gondol. Még én sem tudom, hogy miről, úgyhogy akkor először ezt gyorsan nézzük meg. Köszönöm szépen.
On behalf of the European Liberal Forum, ELF, I would like to welcome you at this important conference on the radical conservatism. European Liberal Forum, or ELF, is a think tank and a foundation of the ALDE party, which is fighting for liberal ideas all across Europe. In ELF, we are a proud organization driven by 54 member organizations for all over Europe, not only the European Union, but also other European countries. And we promote liberal ideas, we fight for democracy in all these countries. And the topic of democracy, of the rule of law, of anti-populism is one of the most important of on our agenda. And so this is very important, the conference that Republikon is organizing today in Budapest on radical conservative is very important to us, and we believe it will bring very useful tools to help us fight against these dangerous ideas and ideologies in the future. This week, we can see more than ever how dangerous radical conservatism is, how dangerous it is in the United States, and also how dangerous it is in Europe. Because these two areas, geographic areas, both America and Europe, they are not in a vacuum. They actually are tightly connected, and organizations and leaders in both of these areas talk to one another so that they can make this radical conservatism even more dangerous for our democracies, for our human rights, and our development. Because they talk so closely to one another and they inspire one another, they grow in force. And this is why it is so important that we, liberals, all over Europe, but also across the Atlantic Ocean and globally, also communicate and exchange best ideas, best practices, but also worst ideas and worst practices on how to develop and how to protect ourselves from radical conservatism. I believe that this great conference organized by Republikon will help us to achieve this goal. So first of all, I would like to say thank you, Republikon, for organizing it. And I would like to wish you all a fantastic, fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Milos. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. It's great to see so many people in this room. Usually our conferences have very good turnouts. I'm really proud to say that, but I can see looking around that the topic of the United States and the relationship of the United States and Europe is particularly interesting, especially on this day and in this time of the year. I'm really happy to see that you're all here. Before we get into our panel, just a very quick technical announcement. The first panel is going to take place in English because of our international guests. The second one is going to take place in Hungarian with our Hungarian guests. So if you need a translation device either for the English or for the Hungarian panels, then you can find them over here next to the stage. So please then take your devices. But as nobody hopped up from their seats, I guess everyone has who needs one. So that done, first let me welcome our guests today. I will go probably from here to the window. Our first guest is Izabela Szostak-Smith from Poland. She's a lawyer, political expert, and the former deputy mayor of the city of Warsaw. Beside her, there is our old friend Zsolt Kerner, the foreign affairs journalist of 24.hu, prominent daily Hungarian news outlet, and a political podcaster very much involved in the politics of the United States. And beside Zsolt, there is Ricardo Silvestre, also a very old friend of ours, not by age, but we have known each other for long. And he's representing Movimento Liberal Social from Portugal. He's a political researcher, author with work published on transatlantic relations. So I'm really, really happy that you're all here with us today. Thank you very much for coming. And Maybe I should start with saying that Joët and Ricardo published a paper last year. This paper, you could probably see the link to the paper. It's available online, the policy paper, which is titled, I want to quote it correctly, "Protecting Democracy from the Radical Conservative Transatlantic Movement." This was published last year. Yes, here it is. This is it in print, but it's also available online if you're interested. It's in English. And it was a very, very interesting and very important publication, I believe. And I think that today it's even more important probably than it was a year ago. Of course, when we started to organize today's event, we couldn't really have any idea whether we would have a result in the US elections, not talking about even what the result would be, but we didn't even know whether there would be a result at all. However, we have one. So actually, before getting into discussing the paper and what you wrote about that, first I would like to go around with you about your reflections on the election results themselves. So after, I guess you're all the kinds of people and you're all in the kinds of jobs that I guess you have been very, very closely following all the developments of the last couple of weeks or probably month. In the United States, and I know this is a very generic question, but I would like to give you the room to come up with what you consider to be the most important. What do you think to be the key takeaways of the election results? Was there anything that surprised you about the outcome of the elections? And if there was anything like that, what would you highlight as the thing that you found the most important lesson for all of us to learn from the results? I don't like to set an order, but we can start from Isabella and let's go towards Ricardo.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this table. I think that there's a very important debate ahead of us that we will be coming back to for the coming months and years. About the American elections, as you know, it's always a race. It's fast-paced, it's emotional, and I believe Americans have really nailed it in terms of the way to get to people and the way to get out the vote. We can observe it and we can learn how the American nation tries to define democracy today. And whether that's a worrying notion or not, for the first time indeed, we've got the president who is a convicted felon. We have the notion of the first president who returns after a period of the different side of the table being in governance. We have a new perspective and a new situation with somewhat the old ideals of the national populism coming back to place. Whether the American nation has learned from it, whether it's got its lessons in the right place, what's going to happen over the next trying months is going to be crucial for how the perception of democracy is going to develop, I believe, in not only the American nation, but also among other countries. The influences will be strong. We know how important role America plays in terms of the world economy and, most importantly, our defense systems. So we will be watching closely the next steps, not only of the president that will start its office on the 20th of January 2025, but also the American response, the nation's response to how the things are going to be governed. I think that there will be a lot of steps taken in a radical terms and into radical corners, but perhaps it will be the society that will find the right rebuttal to keep the democracy in place. We shall see.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to start also with thanking you for inviting me. I try to give a more analytical take on how the elections turned out. So before the elections, everybody expected that the polls will be wrong. And it turns out that they weren't really that wrong. So it's very interesting. I followed Nate Silver's predictions very closely. And it turns out that his most predicted outcome of this election, he runs an aggregation site that does 80 or 40,000 simulations of how the election will turn out based on certain characteristics and polls. And his most probable outcome of the election would be that Trump would have 312 electoral votes. And if he wins Nevada and Arizona, I think the two states, there hasn't been an official result yet. And if he wins two states, he will have exactly 312 votes. So in some cases, the predictions were exactly right. In some cases, they weren't really. I didn't really. So I predicted that Harris will win this election, first of all. I wasn't right about many things, but I was right about one thing, that the Republicans should lose their electoral advantage. So there's a chance that they will maybe win the popular vote as well, and they did. And that means like an overall support for Trump in every county, every state, every city across America. And the only conclusion I can take from that is that this was an election about economics. So this is mainly motivated by inflation, and I think so. This isn't a huge win for the Republicans, and it's an economic win, but it will have huge repercussions in ideology and public policy. And I think one of the most important things will be that I think Joe Biden was one of the great presidents of the 20th century, just after probably Lyndon B. Johnson, and the U.S. has done quite well in economic terms compared to Hungary, it's for sure. But the big question will be, I think, the fight between what we call populism or populist economic theories and what the Democratic left in the US calls deliverism. So how do you make people feel well or good about the economy? How you provide what they actually want? This just, I mean, I'm pretty sure that this will need a lot more analysis later, but this is my favorite new prediction of why it went the way it went. Thank you. Oh, I think you have one. This one has a case. Oh. All right.
Very good. Well, again, like my friend Zoltan said, it is a privilege to be here. And thank you so much for all of you to come. It's fantastic to be back in Budapest. Zoltan is not going to let me lie when I say that I follow Hungarian politics very closely, and particularly regarding the relationship with the European Union, which we think that we need our Hungarian democratic friends in full standard and full stature, not what we have with Orban. Now, I'm going to start with a personal story. This last 2 days have been just one long day. Actually, it started 1 in the morning in election night in Lisbon, in Portugal, where I'm from, because I was invited by a national radio broadcast company to go there and analyze the results. And it was very interesting because at 3 a.m. Lisbon time, I'm starting to look at my clock because I actually have to take a flight to Budapest. And I say that on the air. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to go. I'm flying to Budapest for a conference on the US elections, but I would like to leave one last final word for our listeners. And I am in a table with 3 more journalists and a second analyst, and they all look at me in panic because they knew what I was going to say next. And my words next was like, we're screwed. We are in a very, very dark moment in our history. And this is going to be very, very hard for the next years. We're going to have terrible problems coming from the United States that go from security, economics, health. We have a guy that, RFK Jr., that is supposed to take care of the health department. He says that we should take fluoride out of the water and we should not have vaccines, and COVID-19 vaccine is a hoax. I can imagine all the tourists coming from the United States to Portugal and to Hungary, bringing all the diseases that we eradicated with vaccines. Hey. And then we're going to have problems from purely international support from the United States. And this, my dear Hungarian friends, this is in Portugal. I can only imagine how you guys are feeling right now. So this was the start of my life after the US elections. You can see by my accent, I have a very close relationship with the United States. And that also was a very interesting experience because of that, I came to Tbilisi in Georgia to give a little bit of the perspective from the North Atlantic, being Portugal. And there was a panel, and I wanted to share this with you and with my colleagues. There was a panel about NATO security of the Black Sea. And it was interesting because our friends from Ukraine, from Bulgaria, from Georgia, from Turkey, they were saying, well, should the Black Sea be a NATO sea? Maybe we can have like submarines and destroyers, you know, and then we can have grain coming out of Ukraine, or we can have, like, for example, energy coming from South Caucasus. And it was the Portuguese guy that was like, have you guys considered that if Trump wins the election, there will not be a NATO sea, not only in the South Caucasus, but probably not even in the Baltic Sea, probably not even in the Mediterranean Sea, unless it has to do with Israel? So my final thought for all of you, and I would love to have your reactions to this and your questions, your comments, is that Hungarians and Portuguese and all over the European Union, we have some very tough work to do next 4 years. And I'm just going to give you one example of a lot of them, and it has to do with something that you know here in Hungary, which is diplomacy. The Trump administration was characterized to have ambassadors that were just trolls. They were trying to disrupt locally democratic governments. It happened in the Netherlands, it happened in Germany, happening a little bit here in Hungary. I know it was as declared. But the next batch is going to be even worse. And actually, Zoltan, you were telling me the story about that opinion piece on the paper saying, get your stuff and leave Hungary. Now, maybe it'll be better, because otherwise we're going to come for you. Because Ambassador, you know, you guys know him better than I do. He has strong opinions. Well, that shouldn't be enough to say someone, get the hell out of here now. You and your, how did you call it? Your wife?
Yes, it was. I don't know if you had the pleasure to read the Zsolt Bayer's publication yesterday. Magyar Nemzetközi wrote that to David Pressman, that you and your cute little wife should pack your stuff and get out of here.
This is going to be the next 4 years. And at this level, and this is my final sentence, at the higher level, because I think that there's a coalition between Orbán, Geert Wilders, Robert Fico in Slovakia, Alice Weidel in Germany, Michael Schneider in Austria. These people are going to try to destroy the European Union as it is, and now they have one more source of power coming from the United States. So there's a lot of work to do, and Hungarian people know what that means, our liberal and democratic friends. You guys have been dealing with Orbán all these years, but the fight keep going for liberal values, liberal ideas, democracy. Sorry to be such a downer, but
don't worry. I think you are not the one who's actually the downer. It's the U.S. elections are a downer. You are just the messenger. And actually, there's one little piece of technicality that I forgot to mention at the beginning of the panel. But now Ricardo reminded me that in the end of our discussion, that we will have some time for questions from the audience. So if you have any question or comment to add, then you will have the opportunity to do so. Now I'm turning first to Ricardo and Zsolt, but then to Isabella, to you too, because Ricardo, Zsolt, you published this paper of yours that I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation last year. And this is a policy paper, which means that in the end, you come up with policy recommendations, like how actually Europe can prepare and protect itself, or at least challenge the ideas that are coming, the dangerous ideas that are coming from the United States. And some of your recommendations were that the EU institutions should promote counter-narratives, they should fight disinformation, there should be the creation of both European and transatlantic liberal alliances to step up against what's coming from Trump and Trumpism in the United States. And I'm really curious how you see this now after a year following the publication of your paper. Has anything changed? If you wrote this paper today, after Trump's second victory and return, or well, the beginning of his return to the White House, would you have any different recommendations, or do you see the still? Do you see that the same recommendations are still valid?
The host.
Hungarian. Thank you. But actually, policy recommendations were mostly Ricardo's job in this paper, so I will not take that long. But I mean, what I wrote about the European perspective in this paper is that the two most important things that the Hungarians do in contacting and building a relationship with the US radical right is one part institutions, and the second is personal relationships. And I think they have, in the last year, 2 years, they have much deepened both of these. So in institutions, when I wrote it, I still wrote about the old party groups in the European Parliament, and now they have Patriots for Europe, the big, supposed to be Orban's brainchild. I think it's more a French organization than the Hungarian one, but still, it gives a good basis on interinstitutional cooperation between the radical right parties, the European level, and in the American level. So it's an institution always legitimizes how you work with others. On the personal relationship side, so there was a brief moment, I don't know whether you remember it in this election, still when the primaries were on among the Republicans, and there was a brief moment when Viktor Orban was hesitant between supporting Ron DeSantis from Florida or Donald Trump. And in the end, he decided to keep his support with Trump. Because DeSantis would be a perfect fit for Orban, so intellectually, habitually, I think they're more similar than Trump is, but Trump is a really transactional figure, so it seems like he usually listens to the last person who talks to him, and this is very good for Viktor Orban because he can always call him, so they're in a very tight relationship. But yeah, the situation is not better than it was 2 years ago. And you said the best practices about promoting counter narratives and fighting disinformation. I think the disinformation war is sort of lost. So all the actions that have been taken so far, or the weapons that has been used to fight disinformation, they're useless. They're not working. And promoting counter narratives is also very hard to do when you. So my favorite question about the state of European politics is to tell me, please, who's the leader of the free world right now? It's obviously not Joe Biden anymore. Will it be Donald Trump, or will it be anyone? So when Trump was first elected, there was a joke, or sort of a joke, or a belief that maybe Angela Merkel will be the leader of the free world. Now we have Olaf Scholz, and the German coalition just fell out this morning or last night, I think. So European politics is in a really bad state, and liberal centrist politics are, I think, in a deep problem. So I don't have any solutions for this. I just know that you cannot promote counter narratives without popular counter narratives being present. So you have to find a way to find a popular version of the liberalism we believe in, or the centrism and conservatism that a lot of people actually believe in Europe. But you have to find a way to promote these in politics, and then you can start to promote them. Because if you expect the EU to promote them, these are institutions, so you cannot expect the European Parliament to promote values, because the European Parliament has all the party groups and all the parties inside. So they cannot do it. Commission also, it obviously have values, but those are only the values enshrined in the treaties, not the values they hold politically. There's an EPP dominance in the Commission, but that still doesn't mean anything. And the Council is obviously, like every European country is there. So these are institutions. You have to fight back politically.
Perfect. That's a great answer. I'm going to try to bring it to Hungary again. So there was this, and it's part of this work, has to do with what is called CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee. And I saw a picture of the new Orbán from Portugal, called André Ventura, taking a very smiley, very shiny picture in front of the parliament. And this was a tweet where it was like, "I'm so happy to be in Hungary." I know what this is all about. At the time, they not only have him, but they had Abascal, Vox from Spain. They had Geert Wilders from the Netherlands. They had, at the time, Janusz Morievich from Poland. They were all here in Budapest, in your streets. They're walking around. Why? Because CPAC, again, the Conservative Political Action Committee, they love to come to Budapest. They love to be here. And they have a good friend in Orbán. Now what happens is that you're asking, Zoltan, is this going to be anything different? Yes. Why? Because it's going to be supercharged. Now it's just not a question of having idiots like Tucker Carlson shooting specials with Orbán by the castle, or Vivek Ramaswamy or Matt Schlapp. Now we're going to start having the heavyweights. Now it's going to be not only diplomats, but going to be cabinet members. Get ready to have Trump in Budapest. How he's coming for sure. He's going to have so much fun here in your city with Orbán just stealing around him, showing him, you know, the parliament and the castle and all that crap. So what can we do? Actually, I was telling to Isabel, I was trying to be provocative, but I'm not going to try to talk about communities because she has her own advice on that. But the first thing that I'm going to say to our Hungarian friends, it's like, know your enemies. These are enemies of democracy. Radical conservatives, actually, me and Jolt will talk about this. Why use the expression radical conservative? Because radical conservatives, the description of it in political science, they live with democracy. They don't want democracy to end, but they want to erode it. So they want to try to destroy rule of law. They wanted to try to destroy separation of powers. Everything that you Hungarian friends know so well. And minority groups, and free speech, and academic freedom. That's what's coming. It's coming to Hungary, it's coming to Portugal, it's coming all the way now with this power of the machinery, which is the US state. Because, my friends, the first term administration, they don't know what they were doing. Trump was completely lost. He surrounded himself what he thought at the time would be the right people for the job. And they were, because they protected democracy and they tried to stop him from all the craziness. This second time, we're screwed because there's just going to be fanatics around him. And that will come to Europe in a way that, for example, he said it, and Hungarian friends believe him when he says that. If Putin attacks Tallinn tomorrow, he will not come to the defense of Europe. If he has to put 20% tariffs in our products as they go to the United States, he will put 20% tariffs, even more than that. International help, forget it. To Africa, vaccines, we're done with that. It's going to be America first, and they will try to make it that concept comes to Europe. Because you were talking about the groups in the European Parliament. I studied this very closely. They don't want to have an European Union of values. They want to have a European Union of illiberal values. And they have what they call, it's the Union of Sovereign Countries. This is bullcrap. This is all bullshit. Pardon my French. So know your enemies, know what they're doing, and then don't give up on advance. I know it's hard to say this for a Hungarian group, because you guys have been fighting Orbán for so long, but now we have even more fighting to do, and we can't give up on advance. We cannot just look at Orbán and say he's going to stay here forever, And we cannot look at Trump and say he's going to destroy democracy in America and going to try to destroy the European Union and try to destroy NATO. And we have to, you know, roll up our sleeves and try to save democracy and try to save liberal democracy. There is no other way. There's no other way. Unless we go apathic, despondent, and we just go on with our lives. We keep, you know, scrolling on our phone. And you Hungarians, you know about this. You have your culture, you have your literature, you have your philosophy. You know that this is not a good way of living. And I think that's answering your question, Zoltán. If I would have to write this, I would be like, we are in one of the most important moments in our history, in European history, after the Second World War. It could look like an exaggeration, but it's not. We have a war coming, so.
Isabel, I know that you were not an author of the paper, but I'm really curious how you see this from Poland and how the issues that Zsolt and Ricardo spoke about now affect Poland. And I think the question is very interesting in Poland's situation, because you have a comparison, like how it looked like until the elections in 2023 and how it has looked like since then. Do you see any change? Is there any difference with the relationship of the Polish radical conservatives and the transatlantic, the American radical conservatives, or what's your take on that?
Well, thank you very much. I would like to start with the idea that I do like to disagree with my predecessors here, and in particular with Ricardo in academic debate. He's a Debbie Downer generally. He takes the downslope. And
the realist.
Yeah, the realists. Well, we're both realists, actually, but I try to be the beacon of hope as well. We both agree, however, that the action is in our hands at the moment. And that's the crucial thing, the pivotal thing that actually brought and saved the liberal democracy in Poland in the last year's elections. So, starting with that in mind, you've got to take into consideration the perspective that the idea of the populist nationalism is not new. 1986, Jean-Marie Le Pen brings in the notion that they should stem away or drive away from the European Union, that they should bring back the death penalty and other radical ideas and notions that raised the eyebrows of many. 14 years later, the idea returns, being publicated by the same speaker. The notion, well, we need to take into consideration what actually causes the stir, and how do those voices get so loud in a political stage, and how do they get heard? And there's a very interesting publication of Roger Eatwell and Matthew Goodwin. It's titled National Populism, the Revolt Against the Liberal Democracy. And although I don't agree with every single theory in there, it pinpoints the four most important ideas or that actually caused the situation at hand. And one of them is the economic situation, so and the loss of faith in the politicians that are perceived as elitist, and build that idea in the populist heads that it's us and them, us the people, and them the politicians. Another most important thing is a feeling of safety, and here comes in place the immigration rules. And here comes the first piece of advice. If we do have very strong policy that we unite on in terms of immigration, there will be a massive step towards maintaining the status quo of the liberal democracies. So we fear immigrants, and we fear, we fear other people. the others. It's actually in our brains. The neuroscientists discovered that amygdala is responsible for, just driving us towards the notion of fear when we, as much as look or hear the ideas coming from a different ethnicity group. So building on these fears allows people like Donald Trump to dwell on the idea of us and them, whereas luckily amygdala is not the only part of our brains. And we do have the logical thinking, and we do know that we are all people, and we can unite, and we can build groups among ourselves and promote the liberalism and the rights for everybody. Every single person, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their ethnicity. The third notion, and a very important game changer, is the deepening social discrepancy. There is the Mariana Trench in terms of there is a Mariana Trench in terms of classes. And it's deepening, in particular in the United States. I don't think us, the new democracies, the young democracies of Eastern Europe in particular, have experienced it to such level. But indeed, the gap between the classes in America has deepened and is being felt by the middle class more and more. So, and the fourth notion is the weakened trust for the old parties. And again, as young democracies, we don't see that as much as Americans do. So having that in mind, that they actually overlook the fifth very important element. And I think that this is the most dangerous weapons in the hands of the national populists. And that's a weapon that has been a game player in the last American elections, and that's disorientation, disinformation, and the use of social media as a major player in terms of driving people towards finding answers to what's socially acceptable, and the notion of the bigger part of information that we're going to get, deepening this idea of fear. We could see that, well, we all know about the Cambridge Analytica case, but I wouldn't like to go deeper into that situation. I think that we need to look something that's more obvious and more evidential for the moment, and to consider that that it's not it's just the information that we get about imminent threat from the outside that actually drives us towards a certain political side. And I believe it's been used very, very well by Donald Trump. It's been used in a way that's inexplicable to majority of people, I believe, even in this room, that you can weave the information just to pinpoint certain pivotal ideas. In his speeches, we saw just 3 pointers. Regardless what the question was, he was always coming back to the same things, because he wanted to grind and engrave and, well, basically tattoo in everybody's head the idea that it's going to be the question of strengthening economies, strengthening the borders, and strengthening the immigration rules. Whether it was perceived as illogical when you looked at any of those scrambled types of informations, or whether it was smart and well done, because it was bringing people's minds to entertainment that was coming, or potentially coming from Donald Trump. I'm talking about entertainment. I can see a reaction to that. it wouldn't be the first person who would say that bread and the games are the most important thing in a way to attract the attention of the civil society. And you have seen that Donald Trump has said things that we consider he shouldn't have said, but they actually stirred the nation, and they became another topic for conversation. So his name came out yet again in some conversation. I'm talking about the notion of eating the dogs, or some nation being brought to a level of the island of garbage. It's inconceivable. Kamala Harris would never have done that. She weighed every single word in her speeches. And she did so because she believes in democracy, where you cannot afford to mislead your constituents. You cannot afford in democracy not to be the person, and not to drive the notions, and not to act upon the words that you're going to say during your campaign. On the other side, we had a show. We had a showman with some outrageous ideas, because he knew that he just wanted to tap into this pop culture that we're seeing today, brought to us, among others, by the social media. We wanted the quick information, we want to have the fun of it, we want to feel stimulated. And, perhaps in terms of choosing the appropriate language and choosing the appropriate method of conveying the message, repeatedly pivoting towards those things, he's achieved what he wanted to. So he achieved getting the audition of people who wouldn't normally look at politics. If you have seen the polls, 20% of people who haven't got a college degree, 20% more voted for Donald Trump. What liberal Democrats often overlook is addressing the whole nation. Very often the message is directed at people, at the city people, at people living in larger communities. And that's one thing that definitely needs to change. But I think that the most important point, and Ricardo has foreseen that I was going to make that point. I believe, in my optimism, that the power is in our hands, everybody's hands. Because if we do have the danger of social media, if we do have the danger of pop culture, if we do have the danger of the different way we're ingesting information these days, one thing that we can do to ensure that the truth comes out, that we can actually build the relations, that we can build a strong society, that we can share ideas, that we can argue ideas as they are, is to strengthen the relations between us. It's as simple as, it's as simple as going out and joining the club, joining the society, joining the debate group. It's important for the local governments in particular to play this important role of bringing people together, bringing people from the bottoms up, introducing some ways, some interesting ways, the games and the bread, to involve people, to get them outside of the telephones, to get them outside of the false information, to get them outside of the reach of misinformation, and to strengthen our relations, because, and I come from a very interesting history of Poland, where we have battled the populists twice. The communism first, and then the last 8 years of the governance of the right party, Law and Justice. We have strengthened the ties, the bonds between us, and we didn't exclude anybody from the debate. What happened in just one more thought. Sorry, I know that I'm taking a lot of time, But maybe we can all learn from one thing. You asked me what surprised me in American elections. What really surprised me in American elections was that Kamala Harris, who brought I would say, a nuclear bomb of political idea to actually go into the women's rights and the abortion rights. That itself is a topic that could absolutely sway the public one way or another if addressed the right way. However, I had a feeling, and whenever, I only watched this in the media, whenever I saw this topic being brought up, it was my body, my problem. Pointing out that in the merits, it pointed to the female part of the public, whereas the abortion rights concern as much men as they concern women. They concern families, they concern the mothers, they concern the daughters, they concern the sisters of men. And I've got a feeling that in this particular case, perhaps too many times in a public eye, men were omitted in this debate. So there's so many things that we could look at in terms of communication, but the most important one, let's switch off our telephones and go outside and let's meet our neighbors. Thank you very much.
Isabella, thank you for that. And you raised several very important points. I'm going to choose one on which I would follow up because I can't on all of them. But I think it was very interesting and very important what you said about the way how Trump communicated throughout his campaign. And not only throughout his campaign, I think we can say that that's his personality. It's a very interesting question, really, whether it's deliberate or it's just who he is and he couldn't do in any other way. This is not something I'm afraid that we can figure out today. But I think this is from a European, probably from a Hungarian perspective, it's been really puzzling to understand, like, what is he doing right? Like, how, like, if we just watch a couple of minutes of footage of Donald Trump giving a speech, one might believe that, like, this man is obviously insane. Like, what he's saying, like, that's just not a normal person speaking. Something's wrong. That's for many people. I'm not going to say, on your behalf, dear audience, but for many people, it's quite worrying to see him and to hear him speak. So I'm really curious whether his example, the example that he showed by winning in elections, by speaking as he speaks, by behaving the way he behaves, is this an example for Europe? Is this something that we can expect in Europe? And I think this has two layers, and I would like all of you to reflect on both layers. One is the layer of communications, like the way he speaks, this sort of completely post-truth communication, when you just say whatever comes to your mind. It doesn't necessarily have to be true. If it sounds good, if you feel that it's going to resonate with your audience, you just say it. And the other one is the message, like what you're actually coming up with, like this very, very strong anti-migration message, for instance, the very much isolationist, we only care about ourselves and everyone we don't care about, only ourselves. Are these messages, and is this a way of communication that we can expect to be dominant in European politics, and how dominant it is today? And this question is for everyone.
If I can start, sorry. First of all, I've read a very interesting thing about the company itself, and apparently there's an advisor that was the advisor of Donald Trump in the previous elections. His name is Lewandowski. And his idea was allow Trump to be Trump. And he was brought back to the table at the current elections, and apparently he tried to sway all the advisors or the other advisors away from Trump and carry on with his agenda, but Trump did otherwise. So he listened to his advisors. What they said, we're yet to learn, but I believe that certain things were absolutely calculated. And just as I said, you know, there's this neuroscience behind whatever everybody says. And Donald Trump referred very often to the sales terms when he was speaking publicly. And he is a good salesman himself. He knows how to trigger things. He knows how many times he should repeat things not to make them boring. He knows how many times he needs to address every single voter to actually get out the vote. He knows it. He knows the tactics. And I believe that as much as it was worrying for a normal human being to hear somebody running for one of the most important roles in the current leadership in the world. Still, I believe that, you know, I believe that it was calculated to an extent. Of course, Trump was still, well, Trump. And so that's one thing. And another thing is George Lakoff. I don't know whether some of you may have read this book, Don't Think of an Elephant. He had this beautiful idea of framing as in defining certain terms that will be the leading terms in our democracy. The true danger lies in the reframing of democracy, reframing the words, the ideas and ideals that drive our liberal democracies today. We do have tools to stop it. We do have to protect the media. We do have to protect the civil society, because we can make that change happen, and we can discern the information if we know what's actually happening and how we're being played, to understand and act a certain way. Thank you.
Yeah, so whether we can see this in Europe or not, in some parts we can already see this. So if you look at Trump, and you have to like separate the message from the tone of the message. And I think both are important. So Isabella talked about the campaign. This Trump campaign was more coordinated and better run than any Trump campaign before. This was basically because of two people, his original campaign team. One was Susie Wiles, who is a Republican operative from Florida, and the other was also from Florida. I always forget his name, sorry. They were the original campaign team. Yeah, it was Chris Lasevita. And so if you look at how Trump communicated and how the Trump campaign communicated, they were two completely separate things. So the Trump campaign was communicating on issues and deliberate things that they would expect from the population to be positive about, so economy, migration, stuff like that. And yeah, at some point they decided that they saw that Trump was bored. So he doesn't like to be on message all the time, and they let him loose. Let Trump be Trump. And Trump started talking, but the magical thing about Donald Trump is that he doesn't really talk like a politician. So it doesn't really matter what he says. He doesn't say it like a politician. So he says it like a showman and a normal person. So it doesn't really matter whether he's on message or is he talking about the things that are going to be popular, because he's a campaign in his bag, organizing ads on TV and pushing the message they know it is popular, and then Trump brings the tone and the magic to it and the charisma, so that people will think that these are not politicians, these are normal people who are fighting for us. And this is a half-formed thought from me, but so I think the main difference now between liberals in the US and worldwide and this sort of new populist radical right is that liberals are always aspiring to return to a sort of normalcy where we have won. And this was after 1990, just the normal word was a liberal word, where the liberal elites have won in terms of how people expect to be moral in the race of either ideologies. It was sort of the end of history kind of, the Fukuyama kind of view of the world. But the new conservatives doesn't think like this. So they're not fighting to return to normalcy. The fight is the whole thing of it. So and there's a reason why it looks like Trump is fighting for the average American people, because the fighting is the aspiring state for them. So they aspire to fight and to troll the liberals, drink liberal tears and everything like that. But they feel good when they are fighting. Liberals doesn't really feel good when they're fighting back. They aspire to feel good when we all return to normalcy and everyone just accepts what they are doing. But this is not the case. And I think the radical rights really feel well when they're fighting. Just look at Elon Musk, how he enjoys fighting and how he enjoyed this whole campaign with Trump. And Trump also really enjoyed this. He enjoyed this campaign, I think, better than he will enjoy being president, because that's a hard job. Campaigning is not. So he brings the tone, and he brings a sense of feeling that he's fighting for the people. And to a point, you can sort of disregard what he's talking about. So it doesn't really matter what he's saying. And obviously, there are some cases when he's misogynic. Some of his supporters are also misogynic. He talks about Haitian people eating cats and dogs. And there are, in some parts, there are first-generation immigrants in the United States who think that, yeah, there are too many of us here and this should be the last. We should be the last ones to get in and nobody more. So yeah, there is a thing to that, but I don't think that this is important. The campaign brings the hardcore strategic message, their own message. They are talking about the things that are important, and Trump brings the magic and the charisma and the tone and everything else.
Zsolt, you're saying that Trump brings the magic. I'm like, ready. Yeah, no, I was ready to throw up. I'm going to be very quick because again, I want to listen from my Hungarian friends. You guys have a long history, a long culture of philosophy and political thinking. So, but I need to do 2 points regarding your question, Zsolt, about the message. So, I agree with you, Zsolt. Disinformation battle is lost. We shouldn't spend too much time talking about that. And the pointing out of lies is also lost. Orbán in Hungary, as much as you point out his lies, he still has 45% of the voting bloc. Because we live in a post-shame politic era. Some years ago, you can actually ridicule a politician and he will backtrack. He'll be like, I'm having a reputational cost about being a liar. We don't have that anymore. We're done. So what can I give you? I think one thing we can fight with is to warn people about the full experience. So what I mean by that, Americans are going to try the full Trump experience. Latinos that voted for him, because we should be the last ones, they should get ready to be deported. Black men that voted for him because they didn't want to vote for a black woman, they are ready for a full white supremacy experience. Women that voted for Trump, they should get ready to have their daughters not making any abortion in the United States unless it's illegal, because it's going to be a federal mandate. And we're done with abortion in the United States. So, what can I give you to my Hungarian friends? I take a little bit of the experience from Poland, because one of the topics in Poland, and at the time I was following the elections very closely, was if you vote for PiS again, we're going to lose a lot of freedoms. And one of them is reproductive freedom from women. Every time that Orbán puts a tweet complaining about the European Union, I lowly, alone, Lisbon-based political scientist, I replied to his tweet with this, it's always the same sentence, which is, ask for a referendum in Hungary to leave the European Union. And your punishment if you lose is that you have to resign. I always send that tweet. I can never stop sending that tweet. Every time he talks about the Brussels elites and how Brussels are trying to destroy Hungary, I'm like, put your money where your mouth is. Ask for a referendum for Hungary to exit the EU, and then we'll see. Because that'll be the full experience for the Hungarian people, is to be outside the European Union. Let's ask that to the Hungarian people. Let's see what the Hungarian people says. Of course, Orbán is not going to do that, but I'll leave you with this idea. So what can we do to fight that torrent of just insanity? is to start telling our friends, which is, you want to have the full Orban experience? You want to have the full AfD experience? You want to have the Le Pen experience? Do you really want that? And see what our friends say. Because the problem is that now we live in this fantasy world, which is, what Trump says is not really true. This is like wrestling federation kind of crap turned into politics. Of course, he's not going to ban abortion. Of course, Orban doesn't want Hungary to be outside the European Union. You want to test that? You want to see if that is true or not? Let's go full Trump experience. Let's go full Orban experience. Let's go full Le Pen experience in France. I'm actually from Paris. I was born there. It's so funny to see my cousins that they stood behind. They're French citizens now. Portuguese, third generation. I moved to Portugal. And they're like, oh, we French people, we are in the streets fighting against Macron. And I'm like, sure, you want to have the full Le Pen experience? If Le Pen is president, you won't be on the streets anymore because the police will be at Champs-Élysées opening your skulls with clubs. You're done with free expression in Paris. Do you want to have that? Do you want to have that full experience? I know in Hungary it's so complicated because there's so much state propaganda. But you Hungarians, you know about this. Your universities had to leave. Your intellectuals have to shut up. Fortunately, we have people that keep doing the great job. But you guys being here is actually a proof of courage to be here, because you could be at home on Facebook, you know, watching cat videos. So that'll be my final message. But again, I would love to hear from all of you.
Thank you for all this. And Ricardo, I see that you really want to open up the floor for questions from the audience. But before we get there, we will have time for that, I promise you. But I really have to ask one last question, because this is about yes, actually, I'm trying to formulate the question, because I know you raised some very important points about the ways that American and European radical conservative movement affects one another, like how we influence one another. But I'm really curious whether this relationship that you describe between the two can have any actual positive outcome, like now the second Trump presidency can have an actual positive outcome for illiberal or populist or radical conservative, regardless of how you exactly name them, leaders in Europe. Like, this is something that, Zsolt, you know it very well, that in Hungary this is one of the most important topics, and it has been for some time, whether a second Trump presidency would actually do any good for the Orban government. But I'm really curious how you see how actually it would affect these leaders. What can they expect for their own political agenda, like, the most practical terms?
Somebody's got to be brave and come first. Yes, I'll keep it short. Well, I'll try to dig a little bit deeper towards the notion that wasn't mentioned today, and another threat that the American direction has taken. We have to remember that Donald Trump, well, he doesn't really believe, I think, in climate change. We know that his oil and fracking policy is very strong, and we know that this is a part of the possible economic growth that stems from the change that climate changes are imposing as a threat, and all the adaptation move that we're trying to achieve here in Europe. It has got an enormous result in terms of getting involved, building new companies, strengthening economy. It depends on how we take it in this case. If one of the basically greatest contributors towards the CO2 emissions in the world says, I'm going to go deeper in this direction, whether we are going to try to counterbalance, whether we are going to maintain on this route, and thus provide a scope and perspective for our economy to grow exponentially. Because a good economy and a good growing economy is a great workplace for equality and for the liberal democratic movements. Thank you.
Yeah, so I remember last time when I was here, like a month ago, we debated about whether the Trump presidency would be politically good for Orban. The only thing I said about that is that I expect it to be sort of good for Orban, but only politically, because he'll have much more space to move around in the European Council. So he's pretty isolated right now, but then he will be one of the few people who can always call Donald Trump on the phone. And he'll have a chance to win. And so if he's considered a Trump guy, and you cannot isolate the Trump guy. So whether he will be the Trump guy is still up to question, I think. So there's a chance that there will be a Trump gal in like Georgia Maloney, so there's still competition for that. But I think that we can see just a few days after this that it's actually politically good for him. I mean, Volodymyr Zelensky is coming to Budapest right now, and I wouldn't expect him to come to Budapest if Harris would have won the election. So in a political sense, it's for Orban, it's good to a point, but it's only to a point. For Hungary, economically, it will not be good. So it was much better under Biden than it will be under Trump. But, the taxes, the tariff, the kind of ring of tariff that Trump wants to establish around the United States will not be good for Hungary. And like his opposition against like German auto car industry is famous, and Hungary's GDP is like the third of Hungary's GDP almost consists of working for German automakers. So it will be hard for Hungary. In some cases, I think it will be worse for the radical right in Europe that Trump is in power right now, because Trump doesn't care about them. So it's all right. In the campaign, it was good for him to talk about how Viktor Orban, a very strong man in Hungary, supports him, because he was the only one who he could say that he's openly supporting him. And that's what Orban knew at the beginning, that he is the only legitimate leader, elected leader in the world who openly supports Donald Trump, and that is useful for Trump. And this is a wholly transactional thing. But I expect like the separation of the United States and Europe to be like a shock treatment to the European Union. And I believe the European Union only moves forward when there is a shock. That we could see that at the start of COVID and the start of the war. The EU always gets more united and moves a little bit further to a sort of federalist or like politically unionized state when there is some challenges before it. And this is sort of the biggest challenge that we have seen so far. And I expect a huge shakeup in European politics, actually. And because at some point, people in Europe have to like open their eyes about what's happening. So we cannot, and this is what Macron was talking about for years before. This is strategic autonomy. That we cannot outsource our security, and we cannot outsource our political influence to other states. We try to outsource our solution to migration. We are trying it right now. It also doesn't really work. So Europe has decided at several points in its history to not outsource food production, for example. That's why farmers are so important, because they are a lot more environmentally costly. They are a lot more financially costly to produce food in Europe, but we are not dependent on anybody else in food security, at least if we have at least some part of our farming industry left. And I think we have to make the same choices with like military and also with political ideology. Europe is not a player in international politics right now. Nobody takes us seriously. And there will have to be a huge shakeup in European politics, and that means every country. So there will have to be a shakeup in France, in Germany. As I think Poland is all right now, because there is the sort of one of the more stable governments in the bigger countries in Europe. But every other way, like Orban is one of the more important people because he's politically self-confident. Whether he should be or not, that's a different question, but he's politically self-confident to the outside. And Olaf Scholz is not, and Emmanuel Macron is not, and nobody else is really outside of Giorgia Meloni, and he made some dubious decisions in the past on the European stage, so he's not as confident as, she's not as confident as she could be. But still, I believe we are on the first steps of a huge political shake-up in Europe, because there is no other chance to do this.
No, actually, it's totally going to agree with you. Real politics, the concept in political science of realpolitik, it's going to be what shapes Europe. Because, as you said, Meloni, she had to adjust. If Alice Weidel wins power in Germany and there's a tariffs in German cars, she will have to adjust. If Geert Wilders, and now with his new government and about immigration, he has to adjust. And Orban will have to adjust. If trains are rolling from Kyiv to, and I hope I say this correctly, Sabolsk, if tanks are rolling from Kyiv to Slabovsk, let's see what Orban says then, when Russian tanks are at the Hungarian border. Let's see then how we're going to solve the problems of Europe. So in a way, yes, and finishing, because again, I would like to have the audience coming. Yes, we're up to a rude awakening, and I hope that the European project gets stronger, because people have to get way smarter, from Orban to Fico, from Fico to Geert Wilders, and Wilders to Le Pen. Let's hope so that they can at least see the dangers of this new era that we are.
Thank you very much for all of your contributions. And at this point, I would really like to give the floor to the audience to raise your questions or comments. And I would like to ask for the help of a colleague of mine, probably with the microphones, because, thank you. Because of we can hear you without the microphone, but please take in mind that we have interpretation. So for the interpreters, it's very important that if you ask your questions, that you speak into the microphone. So, are there any questions, comments to our guests about the U.S. elections, about its effects on Hungary, on European politics?
I think you can also ask in Hungarian if that's
yeah. Oh yes, of course, and you can ask your questions in Hungarian too, and because as we have interpretation, our guests will be able to understand.
Well, if not, I can speak for 10 more minutes if you want to.
Oh, there, I can see a question.
There it is.
I think you may really not like my question, but you mentioned a populist solution against the current states. I mean, that maybe the other side could pick up populist rhetoric. I think there is a great example for a populist liberal regime. For example, Milei in Argentina is a really liberal person, and populism still worked for him. So I would like to ask, what is your opinion about Milei? Because I think he's a really important phenomena in the world, because nobody else made a big step towards liberalism in a democratic way in the past 20 years, I think, in the whole world. But maybe I'm wrong.
It turns out that I don't not like your question. I like your question. I sort of like Milei also because he's more libertarian than a liberal, I think, and as a former libertarian, I can relate to that. Argentina is a pretty hard country to be a libertarian in, I think, so there's like 100 years of economic confusion and catastrophes one after another to organize. He's an interesting player, but I was not actually saying that we should just adopt populism and turn it around. Just sort of just look at what what is popular in populism, actually. And actually, the Biden administration tried to do that. That's why I said with the term they coined, it's called deliverism. So they said that populism are the things that are actually popular among the population. So that's where the word comes from. And they will try to solve these problems. So they will look at what people actually care about, and they will solve these issues. And people actually cared about bringing down inflation while growing the economy. They cared about the reshoring of manufacturing. They care about actually producing things again in the United States. They cared about having making more money than before. And in a lot of those things, they were actually successful. So the reshoring of industry in the United States is a huge thing. Industrial policy in itself was missing from the last few administrations. Biden's administration is the first one that took it seriously, and it's working. And like producing microchips in the United States, that was not a thing before. And they built a factory for TSMC in the United States, and they have achieved like amazing yields. So it will be really good. And like, this is not a good sign for Taiwan, because like the importance of Taiwan is that the most semiconductors are made in Taiwan, and the most advanced semiconductors are made in Taiwan. If there is a US factory that can make more advanced semiconductors and they can make it stably with good yields, then Taiwan's importance and the importance of security for Taiwan will be less crucial for the world and the United States, and that means they will probably have more chance to leave China at it. We are not there yet, obviously. But these are actually issues that people care about. And these, like the reshoring and industry policy was the most important in like rural, mostly Republican states. So they tried to solve the issues people cared about. They made a bilateral plan for the border. So because the like border crossings or like meetings at the border were out of control under the Biden administration. That's true. There is a reason for that. Because of like the logs of in the immigration system in the United States, there are a lot more actual meeting points between border guards and people crossing the border. In the previous decades, people were in the United States for a lot longer undetected. So they stayed illegally there. But like how the United States administration works, it's more useful for them to actually meet with the border guards, because there's a policy for that, and they can often be in the United States for like 8-10 years without actually getting accepted or deported. And previously it wasn't the case, so people stayed undetected. So it's not like there's a huge difference in people trying to enter, but there's a huge difference in people meeting border guards. And they actually tried to solve that. They introduced a two-party bill for that, and Trump said that no, he needs this issue for the elections. But like I think I'm talking about a different thing now, but never mind. So delivering is supposed to be populism switched around to the left, and actually the issues the populists talk about solved. Because like when Orban talks about migration, he doesn't want to solve migration. Because it's still a question whether there is actual migration to Hungary. The fact that there is migration to Hungary, but it's completely legal, and Orban's administration is helping it. That's why when you order food in Budapest, you usually meet a nice Filipino man who's bringing it out to you. So illegal migration is not an issue, but they need it as an issue. I don't know the solutions for how to use populism, but going back to Milei, what you need is actual charisma and political. So what you need is people who have actual things to say about politics, who think about issues, that they're not just on message, but they're interesting. They're sometimes loud, but charismatic. That's what I talk about when I talk about the magic of Trump. That you need people who are recognizable, who think about politics, and who doesn't really. So I think the common thing in Trump and Milei is that they don't like peer review the things that they think about the world. So they are not interested in being on message in which a message is like the exact message that can reach the most amount of people because they have actual things they think about the world. If that's an understandable statement.
Yeah, just a quick word and just a quick comment. Thank you very much for the question, because I think it's an important one, especially today. The world is changing, you know, every couple of years at the moment. The world is changing as we speak. We've got new technology. We've got new ways to communicate. And we've got new frameworks for what we actually mean by certain things. We do need to find the answer in every single country, in every single nation. We need to find the answer to question what is liberalism, what is nationalism, how do we define those things? Because we're very uncertain about it. And in the hands of a wrong person, it could be a very dangerous tool towards either political space. So if you think about reframing liberalism, you don't really want to go, you know, you want to take the right measures. You don't want to think outside of the square. So one thing is to ask an important question, and the other one is how do we answer the important questions? I don't know, Trump and his idea of education, where he wants to scrap the Ministry of Education and he wants to make everything private. How dangerous it's going to be for the future generations, where I don't know, the less educated families are going to take on the homeschooling because they're going to receive the money for it. What are going to be the results that we do not think as imminent results of the answers that, you know, somebody wants to hear? I want the money on my desk. This is the promise, and that's, you know, that's something that's going to be very effective in terms of swaying the vote one way or another. So, just as I said, this is an important tool in our hands to say, like, let's not go there. No, the liberalism is not such and such. Let's not go too far. Let's not, you know, rush ourselves into giving the wrong answers to those questions that are posed today. Thank you.
Ricardo, I'm sorry, before you answer, I just have to raise this. This is a little internal joke, but a couple of weeks ago, I was a speaker at a panel in Poland that you moderated, so the roles were switched at the time, and the title of that panel was...
You do a better job than I do, so...
You're doing such a much better job. But actually, the title of that panel was How to Make Liberalism Sexy Again. So I think this is the question that we are actually discussing now. Like, is populism as a tool, as a political instrument, is something that other ideologies, for instance, liberalism, can use?
All right, there's a lot of confusion going on, not here, but generally in society. There's nothing wrong with populism. In political science, populism, and actually you describe it, Schultz, it's to give the population what they need. That is populism. The problem with radical populism is to give simple solutions to complicated problems. And in here, we're going to have another clash with the full Trump experience or the full Putin experience. So let's go back to Hungary again. I gave the examples of the tanks rolling. Let me give you another example of the full Putin experience now that he's going to have the support in Washington to Hungarian people. Ukrainians already have this story to tell, because if Putin closes the gas, Ukraine freezes. Actually, that was one of the things that originated the revolution in Kyiv that we know. Now, Orban is counting on having Putin as an ally. Let's see how long does that last. Let's see how long Putin, with support of Trump, cares about Orban. And let's see if the discounting energy that comes from Russia continues in Hungary. Let's see that happen. Let's see that unfold in front of us. So there's nothing wrong with populism. There is wrong with this idea of populists saying that, no, I alone can fix it. Because it's complicated problems that need nuanced solutions. Now, the provocation from Zoltan, and a very good one. Exactly, we were in Łódź. Actually, I'm recovering from a flu. I got a Polish virus, then I took it to Portugal, and now I have it here in Hungary. So, but already I don't have, I'm not contagious. But I got this tremendous flu from Łódź because we're trying to make liberalism sexy again. So because this is the European Liberal Forum and also Republican, it's a proud member of that family, of the family of the liberals of Europe. I made the argument in which, and I'll make it here again, which is we are not facing the problems as we should as liberals. And actually you were saying this. It's kind of a soft, mushy thing. Liberals in Hungary, liberals in Portugal, liberals in France, where we try to, you know, not provoke, try to give good solutions, data analysis. We try to explain people that actually their lives are not as bad. We had a workshop with the European Liberal Forum, by the way, as we were preparing for the European elections. And at the time, I was, again, I'm the guy raising my hand and trying to stir problems. Because we're having this workshop, and the thing was going very well, which is how can we liberals convey political message to the European Union voters? And I got to a point that I was like, when are we going to inject fear into our political messaging? And my friends, you can see the rest of the workshop colleagues, her faces were melting. No, we're liberals. We don't use fear as a political message. All right, let's see the results of the election then. We got our asses kicked. It was a terrible result for the liberals in the European Union. So I'm not say that we have to, you know, be savages, but to make liberalism sexy again, we actually have to make people understand that they live in liberal societies. They don't know they live in liberal societies, and when they lose it, they don't get it back. Hungary is a good example. So that'll be, again, my final note. But please tell me what you think. I'm actually surprised being in Budapest and people are not sharing their thoughts.
Köszönöm szépen, Huszár Tamás óvodai liberális vagyok. Néhány évvel ezelőtt 3 olyan kipróbált demokráciába, mint az USA, Nagy-Britannia és Izraelbe rossz irányba kezdtek menni a dolgok. Aztán 2 helyen jó irányra változott ez a helyzet. Sajnos ugye tegnap előttről tegnapra a legfontosabb helyen, mondjuk az USA-ba ismét kellemetlen pozícióba kerültek a liberálisok és a demokraták. Tudom, hogy önök nem jósok, de mégis kíváncsi lennék arra, hogy van-e elképzelésük olyan irányba, elsősorban Európáról beszélek, hogy ahol már néhány országban sajnos ugye az utóbbi időben szélsőjobbos populisták is hatalomra ugyan még nem kerültek, de igen jó eredményeket értek el választásokon. A közeljövőben eljuthatnak-e a kormányzati hatalom átvételéhez? Köszönöm szépen.
Yeah, wanna start?
I go first. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this question, Mr. Uso. I believe that, yes, of course, there is a very, very strong debate and very, very big fight between the notion of the nurturing parent and the strong forced parent, as we try to define the nation leaders. And it will come into play, and it will be the dance. But I do strongly believe that, you know, whether one side is going to get swayed, well, strongly depends on the response of the nation, strongly depends on the turmoil that any decision could stir and cause. It strongly depends on how many people do actually get out to the streets to oppose anything that could cross the line of what they perceive as the line of democracy. And it's a very important notion because many political scientists say today that the national populists have many things in common, but they are not really radical, not truly radicalized, to say or to deny the democracy as the core of the political value. So having that in mind, we have to remember we're not that deep yet. We're not diving head straight into an empty pool. We are actually at a very good situation where we can still come out to the streets. You know, coming from a country that used to be the communist country where we couldn't gather. The gathering could be two people talking on a street, and the militia would come over and they would snatch you, and you know, anything could happen. We're not there yet, and it's in our power and in our hands to defend the democracy that we've got. It is all of us that are responsible for whatever's going to happen. It is our responsibility to voice our disagreement to anything that could cross that line. And yes, it is a dance. It is a dangerous one as well. And anything that could happen, any deep crisis that happens, the war that's practically on the border, you know, like on the eastern flank of the European Union. We were fearing what would happen with the COVID and how that would change the political situation. But we do stand strong. So yes, being here as a Polish person and a beacon of hope to oppose what Ricardo is trying to say, there is hope, and the hope is us. Thank you.
It was a fantastic question. I have a two-part answer, but I'll make it really quick. Locally, there's firewalls we can use. So, for example, Sweden, the Sweden Democrats, which is mostly a radical political party, they gain power, and the Liberals and Democrats join them in government. Now we have the Netherlands. PPV from Geert Wilders won enough votes, and then the Liberals and the Democrats are in the government with them. That is another debate. We're not going to have it today, I guess, which is, should we do that or not? For example, in Portugal, definitely we're not doing it. We're not making coalitions with the extreme right wing. And I'm very proud of my country. So often, it's so rare to be very proud of my country politically, but I'm very proud. Now, let's get back to Hungary. I know my liberal friends in Hungary, political parties, that is. I'm not going to, go into details, but could we have some kind of work together with TISA? Did I say that correctly, TISA? I don't know. I'll leave that for my Hungarian friends to you guys discuss in here. Could we have that firewall against Orban, like we did in Poland? Have an entire coalition. I'm actually very saddened because, again, I care about Hungary. I'm very saddened that my Hungarian friends cannot have a full broad coalition like our Polish friends did to get Orban out of power in Hungary. And I know the danger of saying this in Budapest, but I really don't care. We're in a war right now. And Orban is going to be an ally of our enemies. And I want him out of power in Hungary. So, I don't know, maybe Hungarian friends can join with TISA. Now, regarding the European Union, I have very close relationships with some members of the European Parliament. As long as we have PPE, which is the Democrats, populists in a good way, and the socialists and Democrats, so those are the two big groups in the European Parliament, and then the Liberals are the third, well, now they're not even the third, or like the fourth group, but they can help. We can continue to have 5 more years of European Union functioning pretty much as we like, but the thing is that the radicals, conservative radicals, are going to try to push the European Parliament more to the right. And Zsolt, you know about this. You're just saying the 2 new radical groups that were formed. They will try to push the center of power in the European Parliament more to the right. Now, I'm very interested to see if realpolitik in the European Parliament will survive with this now new power that these political parties have now with the election of Trump in Washington. So we'll see in the near future.
Just sort of briefly, yeah. So actually, in the start of like 2024, we described this year as that this year will be the year of elections, and we just, I think, finished with that. And most of them actually went well for the centrist forces. If you just look at like Renew in the European Parliament, well, not that well, but if you look at all the centrists with the EPP, as Ricardo said, and the SND, the European parliamentary elections were fine, and there were a lot of like beacons of hope. Moldova, for example, where the people who left Moldova actually just brought it back from the brink in the elections and in the popular vote. So it's a very interesting thing to see. I would be a lot less confident in Great Britain actually than you seem to be, because I don't think that this coalition will last long. But let's hope that there will be some changes on the right at least, and we'll see about Israel also. The United States, if you want to look at the bright side, I think the one good thing that coming out of this Trump win will be that the limits of the rule of law will not be tested that much after the elections, because Trump won, so he doesn't have to agree to a loss, and he will not try to like overthrow the government. And I don't think that Trump is reproducible. As I said, Trump is magic, so probably if Trump doesn't run again, then Republicans will not be this successful. And like if they will try to overthrow the government, it will also not be that successful. So we sort of don't have to look at the limits of rule of law in the United States and election integrity. So we kind of managed to avoid that. Whether this is a good thing or not, I'm still debating. That this is sort of one of the better aspects of a Trump win.
I'm just going to do a very quick follow-up, because it has to do with what Zsolt was saying in the question from our guest, which is try to have the full Orban experience. All right, again, we're talking with our friends here in Budapest, and let's try to have the full Orban experience. To have more radical conservative movements pushing the European Parliament more to the right, it's, for example, to end the conditionality mechanisms. So no more protection of rule of law in Hungary regarding money that comes from Brussels. Let's end that. Let's end the sanctions against Russia. Let's have Putin have all the money he needs to, replenish his military might. Let's have the full Orban experience. Let's do what Orban wants to do to Hungary and to Europe. Let's see how people react to that. So again, very quickly, just a follow-up about what Zsolt was saying, about the rule of law in particular in Hungary.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Isabella, Ricardo, Zsolt. Thank you for having been our guests today. And thank you very much for all of you for coming and joining us for this very important and very timely discussion. I really hope that in the future we'll have the opportunity to have you again to follow this discussion, probably from a better perspective in what we are at the moment. But until then, please, if you're English speakers, check the publication, the policy paper that I mentioned before, Protecting Democracy from the Radical Conservative Transatlantic Movement. It's available on the European Liberal Forum's website. You can download it from there for free. And I would also like to invite you to stay for the second half of our conference that we are going to start in roughly 10-15 minutes. So we are going to continue with a bit more focus on the Hungarian situation and on how the elections in the United States are expected to affect politics in Hungary. Thank you again for having been here. I hope you can stay for the second half of the panel. And thank you again for being here. See you in, well, let's say 10 minutes.